Welcome into the very first episode of Bracket Buster Breakdown. This is going to be your home for college hoops talk here on the Nick Burt Sports Network. I am, of course, as always, your host, Nick Burt. This has been a long time coming, just with football season ending. I kind of felt like the right time to do this, especially given that we're in the home stretch here. We're only going to get a month and a half, 2 months out of it. But, this is the most intensely packed part of the college basketball schedule. We are rapidly nearing the end of the regular season. Conference tournaments technically start in 6 days, I believe, technically. But we are rapidly nearing the end, so I figured it is time to dive into college basketball here. And we're going to start with kind of just, if you haven't been paying attention, what we need to look for going into March, and take a look for those bracket busters. So this week, it's going to be especially devoted to that. Today, it's going to be the Power Six conferences. And then on Thursday, we're going to take a look at some outliers, some teams you want to keep your eye on in lesser conferences that, could potentially be there on a 13 seed line or a 15 seed line and potentially pull off an upset against a 2. You never know. That's going to be the whole goal of this. We're going to look for those diamonds in the rough. But first, we got to take a look back at the season that has been so far and the season that is wrapping up. So we're going to just do a college hoops roundup here. With the Power Six, I have them done by their ranking in KenPom, 1 through 6. All 6 are thankfully in the top 6 because there were some moments where, those bottom conferences were getting passed by, some of those very good non-power conferences. But here we are. So we're going to start off with the number 1 conference in KenPom, and really what has been one of the best basketball conferences this year, and that is the Big 12 conference. Every night in the Big 12 just seems to be an absolute gauntlet of basketball. This year was the first year of the new additions. They added BYU, they added Houston, they added Cincinnati, and they added UCF. Of course, those were mostly, teams brought in because of football, but, conference realignment, it's a thing now, and as much as it boggles the mind, especially with yesterday's news of UMass moving to the MAC, which probably can be got into on Thursday because we'll get into the A10 at that point. This has been a very, very good basketball conference, and it has gotten even better with these additions. The past few years, we've watched Houston just dominate the American. Nobody was touching them in the American, and the term was, okay, we'll just wait and see them in the Big 12, and we'll see that fall off. Well, guess what, folks? Houston is the number 1 team in the Big 12 right now. They currently sit 11-3 in the conference. As this is being recorded, they are playing another game, so they're going to be 12-3 probably by the time you see this. But they're 24-3 overall. They're currently the number 1 team in the nation with the new AP poll that came out yesterday. And let me tell you, folks, this Houston team looks very good. The question is, of course, can it hold up in March? That's been the thing these past few years. They couldn't hold up in March, and it all collapsed in the tournament. They've always had that momentum there since that 2021 Final Four run. They've had that momentum. They just kind of couldn't get there. Last year it was against Miami in the Sweet 16, a Miami team that I don't think a lot of people had high expectations of. The year before, I believe it was Villanova in the Elite Eight, where they were just on the brink of going to back-to-back Final Fours. So this year for Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars, I don't think people expected them to be as good as they are, especially going into the Big 12. Like I said, it is a gauntlet. It is just so much good basketball all around. Some very good teams that aren't as high here in the Big 12 standings. I mean, if you look at like Baylor, you look at TCU, they're both very good teams, yet they sit at the 4 and 6 seed in the Big 12 currently right now, respectively. And this has been the basketball conference to watch this year. If you are a lover of basketball, of high-scoring basketball, I should say, because basketball purist, the conference that's going to come up next, that is the conference here. But, I mean, Houston's very good this year. Iowa State, very, very good. Kansas, it's Kansas. They've had their moments. They've looked good and they've looked bad. Baylor, like we mentioned earlier. Texas Tech, they kind of seem to, they reemerged from Chris Beard leaving from Texas. They kind of had a few off years. It finally feels like they're reemerging from that once again. And then you get into the mix of the teams that kind of see themselves bubble-ish. You have BYU, you have Oklahoma, you have Kansas State, who went to an Elite Eight last year and lost to Florida Atlantic at Madison Square Garden. You have Texas. There. They'll probably end up in the tournament. Obviously, there's a lot of factors here. But then you get to basically the bottom 4, and these teams aren't really going to have a shot at the tournament this year, it feels. I think Cincinnati is like the next 4 out, and they've been falling as of late. UCF, they've pulled off a few good wins, but they're barely over 500, so they're not going to be there. Oklahoma State's just having a bad year. And West Virginia dealt with a lot of stuff in the offseason with the firing of Bob Huggins, their longtime head coach. Didn't really seem like they were prepared for that, and we just ended up in this situation where they kind of had a lame duck year, and that's basically what this was. And I don't really think there were a ton of expectations for this team this year, even though they spent a lot of money on NIL. They spent a lot, and for it to only come out with currently 9 wins, that's not great. But, I mean, the Big 12 tournament this year is going to be one to watch very much, because we have an opportunity where I think we're looking at, just looking here, I think anybody on this ranking right now, probably from Houston to Texas, I can see winning this tournament. Because all it takes is to get hot. You got to have a week where you're hot, and you can end up winning the conference title with that automatic qualifier into the NCAA tournament. We saw Georgetown do it in the COVID year. But this is certainly the conference to watch. If there were no other conferences, you had to pick just one, it's probably going to be this one, because it does have the most enjoyable basketball, just because of the high scoring of it, just everything about it. It's very fun to watch. So that's a take a look at your Big 12. If I had to pick right now a team, I like Iowa State. I think Iowa State's a very good team. My biggest worry, they're very good at home. They're undefeated at home. It's on the road and in neutral sites that they've lost this year. They lost to Virginia Tech and Texas A&M. I believe that was in Atlantis, if I'm not mistaken. It was a neutral site. Like I said, I believe it was Atlantis. I could be wrong. No, it was Orlando. They lost to Virginia Tech and Texas A&M. They lost to Oklahoma on the road. They lost to BYU on the road, Baylor on the road, and Houston on the road. Now, of course, those are all very good teams, but they have also made the Hilton Coliseum a fortress this year. Now, of course, that doesn't truly matter come March, because you're playing all your games in neutral sites. So I like Iowa State for winning the Big 12. I don't see Houston being their first year in the Big 12 ending up winning this, but there's a very real possibility that could happen. So that is your Big 12, roundup there, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in that conference. It is time to move on to the number 2 ranked conference in KenPom. It's personally my favorite conference. I love the basketball in this conference. It just brings me so much joy to watch almost every game of this conference's basketball. I love all the teams in it. They all have their own little things about them that I love. And that conference, I mean, it's the home of the defending national champions. It is the Big East Conference. And if you haven't tuned into basketball since April, UConn picked up where they left off. And guess what? They may even be better than the team that you saw in April, just dominating their way to a national title. This team has just, Dan Hurley kind of reloaded the squad a little with NIL. They've figured things out, and man, do they look like a better team this year than they did last year. And they won a national championship last year. They're looking to be the first back-to-back national champion since 06-07 when Florida did it under Billy Donovan. And let me tell you one thing. There are a lot of similarities to this UConn team and that 2007 Florida team that won the national championship. There's a lot of similarities in there. Had a lot of returning starters, brought in a few key pieces to fill some holes that left for the draft from the previous team. You've got a coach that is just going to win at all costs, basically. Then you have a season where you dominate a lot, and then your losses kind of just are shocks, and they don't look good on the schedule, I guess I would say, with the differential points between the two, and then you just see them turn it on once again. I like the similarities between these two teams. Right now, I know I am wearing the national championship shirt. No bias whatsoever. I think UConn has a very good chance of going back-to-back this year. I really like what Dan Hurley has done with the squad this year. Now, this isn't going to be all about UConn and how they currently sit at 15-2 in the conference. They most likely will have the regular season wrapped up by the end of this weekend. They play Seton Hall at home on Sunday. That is their next game. They're most likely going to have the Big East wrapped up by then. They'll have the 1 seed at MSG, or as they like to call it, Storrs South. That place gets very loud for UConn games. It's going to be a sight to see come, second weekend in March, third weekend in March, somewhere. One of those weekends, whenever the Big East tournament is. It's going to be something. But let's not just focus on UConn here. This conference is still full of stars. I mean, you got Tyler Kolek at Marquette, who currently sit at 12-4 in the conference. You have Baylor Shireman at Creighton. What a performance from him this year. They currently sit at 11-6. They're coming off a huge win against UConn last week. Of course, then they followed that up with a bad loss against St. John's at Madison Square Garden on Sunday. You have Eric Dixon for Villanova. Villanova kind of struggled this year, but I mean, they're still Villanova. They're on the bubble right now. They could use another marquee victory. I think they'll have the opportunity at it come the tournament. Big East tournament, that is. They do still have Creighton, though, at home, so there's another chance there for that. But they strictly find themselves on the bubble right now. A shocking team this year, Seton Hall. I personally did not think Seton Hall was going to be good this year. I thought that they were going to finish, in the bottom half of the Big East. I figured they'd be playing on Wednesday of the Big East tournament, and for those that don't know, it's 6 through 11 play on Wednesday at the Big East tournament. I thought they would be in that range. And they beat UConn at home. They still got another game against UConn that's going to be on Sunday. Like I said, it's probably going to end up being a loss, but you never know. This St. John's team, they've been sneaky good. I know that they aren't they're bubble-ish. They're on the right side of the bubble right now, but I know some people kind of keep taking them out. I think they're better than what people think they are. I mean, Kadari Richmond, that man carries this team this year. I mean, he's very good at what he does. Another team, Providence. I know a lot of people kind of expected a bit of a downturn after, Ed Cooley left. Yes, they have slightly regressed a little, but Kim English, I think, is making the most of this situation with Providence. I mean, they're very good. I mean, Bryce Hopkins, he's out for the season. That was a huge, huge injury for Providence. It kind of felt like that was going to be Providence season's over. Let's move on from here, basically. We didn't get there. Devin Carter he has been showing up for this team, making sure that they get to the tournament somehow. And then you had St. John's there for a minute, and then they kind of fell off. Rick Pitino ripped into his team last weekend, 2 weekends ago. It seems like it did something. They beat Creighton at home, which is MSG, on Sunday. You have Xavier. This hasn't been a good year for Xavier. Sean Miller just hasn't been great this year. I think next year, if he comes back, there's a lot of rumors they might be taking the Ohio State job. If he comes back, I think we see a very different Xavier than we did this year. Butler, they also had their moments, especially the past few weeks. It looked like they were going to end up being solidly in the tournament. They've taken a downturn as of late. Kind of looks like they're going to be NIT bound. And then you get to the bottom of this conference. You have Georgetown and DePaul. I shouldn't really focus much time on them. Georgetown's 2-15 with their 2 wins coming against DePaul. DePaul's 0-16. These two teams aren't good. It's bad. Tony Stubblefield already fired. He was fired late January, early February, somewhere around there. Matt Bray has been doing the best he could with this DePaul team. There's just nowhere this team can go. Again, this, for me, is my conference. This is my basketball purist conference. This conference is basketball. That's personally me. This conference is basketball. If I have to pick a team to win it right now, I'm going UConn because they've just been dominant, like I said. Moving on, it is the conference that I technically am affiliated with, given that the university I graduated from is in it, and that is the Big Ten Conference. And yeah, this it's something. I personally, this conference isn't good. Last year they had 8 teams make the tournament. One of them made it the second weekend. We sit here again, Purdue being very good. They sit at 14-3. They're going to end up being the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Probably end up winning it. I don't know. And then they're going to lay an egg in the tournament as they always do, unless this is a Virginia-type year where coming off losing to a 16 seed, they're going to go all the way and win a natty. I don't believe that, but I mean, you never know. This conference isn't good. I don't see any teams that are a real threat to win a national championship, which is a problem. I mean, the Big Ten gets hyped up every year. Like, wow, like this is a gritty conference. They've got some really good teams that could really make a run in March. I don't see those teams this year. Purdue, I think, is fraudulent, as they always are. I mean, we saw what happened last year. I think if you somehow shut down Zach Edey, they're going to lose. You have Illinois, who is dealing with a lot with Terrence Shannon Jr. and how he really shouldn't be playing, but here we are. They're good. They're not great. I've seen a lot of weakness in their team. If they go up against the right competition in March, they're going to be out quickly. Wisconsin, they had a run in January and then they completely fell off the face of the earth. I don't think they're good there. Northwestern, it's Northwestern. They're led by Boo Boo, who's in his like 17th year at Northwestern. And then we just start getting down more and more. And the more and more these teams start to suck. Nebraska is only good at home. Michigan State is a dumpster fire. Minnesota, they're a year early. They'll be better next year. Iowa, they're falling victim to Fran McCaffrey syndrome again. Penn State, I think Mike Rhodes is doing a lot more than he should with this Penn State team in year one. He was not left with a lot. It kind of says a lot about this team, I think. Maryland isn't good. Rutgers is something, and it's not good. Indiana is also a dumpster fire. I think we're starting to get to a point, I think in January and early this month, it was Mike Woodson's fine. He'll be back next year. And now I think we're starting to get to a point of, hey, we may need to have a conversation about Mike Woodson. I don't think that's going to end up working out well for him, but hey. Ohio State, they've already parted ways with Chris Holtmann. And since then, they've pulled off wins against Purdue at home and then on the road against Michigan State. And then we get to the bottom of this conference, and it's Michigan, and they're absolutely terrible. So this conference isn't that good. I will be 100% honest with that. I don't think this conference is good. Zach Edey, he's tall. That's about it. For me, that's it. He's tall. He's not outstanding. He's just tall. Jameer Young, he's been very good at Maryland. It's a shame that they're not going to make the tournament because Kevin Willard is just not good with this team right now, it seems. So I will see where they go with that. And really this, like I said, this conference just isn't good this year. I don't really see a threat of any teams here to win the tournament, honestly, to even make the second weekend. I think Purdue will get a difficult 8 or 9 seed because, if we're honest, college basketball, there's like 2 or 3 good teams this year, and then there's just a lot of okay teams. And by good, I mean like elite, possible, national championship type teams. I think there's like 5 or 6. The rest of this is just meh. And then there's just the absolute bad. It's just a complete mix of teams. Right now, if I had to pick a team to win this, I honestly have no idea. Give me Purdue just because Zach Edey's tall. It will still be Big Ten refs, and they'll find a way to win the Big Ten tournament. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the South, the Southeast Conference to be exact. It's an okay year, I guess, for the SEC. We were worried about some of the teams earlier on in this year, and we found some new teams to watch, some other teams not so much. Starting off at the top with Tennessee. This team that always seems to be very good, and then, come March, they fall off the map, and they just lose to, a double-digit seed for no reason whatsoever. Last year, it was Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16. It's a game they shouldn't have lost. They probably should have made the Final Four last year. They didn't because they lost to Florida Atlantic. This year, they're good. They faced off against Purdue, Kansas, and North Carolina back-to-back. They lost all 3. But other than that, they haven't really had any terrible losses, if we're being honest. They lost to South Carolina, and they lost to Texas A&M. South Carolina we're going to get to in a minute, but Texas A&M, not so great. Alabama, it's Alabama, so they were going to be good this year. Nate Oates, since he got into Alabama, he's had this team rolling. They're a very good team. I don't think they're a huge threat come March, but they're still a very good team. You have Auburn, of course. Bruce Pearl has gotten that team rolling these past few years. It always seems like they're in contention to win the SEC. And then you get to South Carolina. This has been a great year for South Carolina. I believe it's the first year under Lamont Paris, their head coach, or second year, I should say. It's the second year. Last year was his first year, and it was kind of, it feels like this is his first year. Last year was a year zero type thing, given, the situation he was inheriting. I think South Carolina, they currently sit with five losses, I believe, right around there. Their losses have been bad, and their wins not outstanding. I think they're more of a factor of having a weaker schedule than it is them being good. I think they're one of those teams that are going to be a higher seed come March, but I don't think it's going to end up working out for them. And then we come to Kentucky. Kentucky, they've had their moments this year. We know they lost to Kansas in the Champions Classic back in November. They lost to UNC Wilmington at home. And then we got to SEC play. It kind of just, they went win-loss, 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 it kind of felt. They lost to Gonzaga a few weeks ago. And then they lost, I believe, to LSU last week. That was on the road. They're very inconsistent. If they're on, they're a very good team. I think they are a national championship type team if they're on. But if they're off, they are very much off. And, honestly, any team could probably beat them that night. That's what worries me about this Kentucky team. I think they're good, but they need to be consistent. And that's really all it is for them. If they could stay consistent, this team would be national title contending. I don't know if they can do that. And then you get a mess of teams from there on down. But right now with the SEC, I know Tennessee's up there. I know Alabama's up there. I know Auburn's up there. It just kind of feels like this is the year that Kentucky just gets it in a groove come March, I guess I would say. It just feels that way. Just with the inconsistencies that they've had, it just feels like Calipari gets this team ready for March, and then, they're winning the SEC and they're in a Final Four. Now, contrary to that, it's also very possible that this team just flat out combusts on the national stage and they are just deader than dead, basically. So I'm picking Kentucky to win the SEC just because I think that they can get hot, but I'm not placing any bets on them. So now, given that we've done the Southeastern Conference, now we'll take a look at the Atlantic Seaboard and take a look at the teams there. And that, of course, is the Atlantic Coast Conference, which I truly have my own opinions on this conference. I think this is... It's the worst conference out of the Power Six. I think not enough is being talked about the downfall of this conference the past few years. And guess what, folks? It's only getting better in the next few years when, they add the corpse of Stanford and Cal and the zombie, whatever you want to call SMU. Really glad those three are coming to this conference. It's going to make this thing even better. This conference is not good. If we were serious about, putting good teams in the tournament, this would be a two-bid league. It would be North Carolina and Duke making the tournament, and that's it. Truly, I don't think anybody below them is that good, yet they're going to find a way to get 6 teams in the tournament, and that's what we're going to be at, because it's the ACC, it's a name brand. We're going to put 6 teams in there instead of, whoever that ends up on the wrong side of the bubble. I think there's better teams out there than, the Virginias, the Wake Forest, the NC States, the Clemsons, Syracuse. There are a lot better teams out there. But we're not going to see them because the committee is going to put 6 ACC teams in the tournament because why not? So enough about me ranting about how bad this conference is. Let's take a look at why this conference is so bad. North Carolina, they sit atop the conference. They sit at 14-3. They're good. I don't know what this Hubert Davis experience is. Obviously, we had that first year of him. They go to a national championship game. They end Coach K's career, which is the biggest bragging rights that you could have in that rivalry. Then you have last year, which was a dumpster fire. And then you have this year where they're kind of back. They're going to end up being a top 2 seed, I think. They're going to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. I don't see them falling to a 3, but they're going to be somewhere around there. I don't think they're that great. I don't think they're a national title contender. I think they're being propped up by how bad this conference is. They lost to a bad Georgia Tech team. They lost to a Clemson team who's okay. They lost to a Syracuse team who's not good. They basically got their doors blown off of them against UConn and kind of against Kentucky too. Those were earlier on in the year, obviously. You kind of take those with a grain of salt for when they happen to where we are now. You got different teams now. But I don't love Duke either. I think they're also being propped up by just a bad schedule. I don't think, they lost to a bad Arkansas team, like a really bad Arkansas team, and then followed that up with losing to that bad Georgia Tech team. Lost to a Pitt team that's not great. They recently lost to Wake Forest, who the metrics love, I don't. And of course, that ended with the court storming incident with Kyle Filipowski faking an injury. It's something. The discourse going on about that is truly, it hurts the head. It truly does. That's a different conversation for another day. But then we get down. Virginia's just bad basketball. In adjusted tempo on Ken Pom, they sit 362 out of 362. It's absolutely disgusting to watch. It honestly might be worse than, being tortured by like your worst sports memories. Having to watch either your team play against Virginia or having Virginia be like the only game on, it's torture. It truly is. Wake Forest, I truly don't know enough about them to say much about them. I don't think they're great. I know the metrics love them. I personally don't, just because I haven't seen enough of them. Wake Forest kind of feel odd this year. And then I could keep going down this list. None of these teams are good. Honestly, none of them are. You got the dead corpse of Louisville sitting at the bottom of the conference. Hopefully there's some revival next year under a new coach, but I don't even want to pick anybody to win this conference because I don't think anybody's good. But if I had to pick, I'm going to go North Carolina just because they're the number 1 team right now in that conference. Probably be a North Carolina Duke final, which the ACC tournament's in Washington, D.C. for some godforsaken reason. Whatever. That conference made their bed. They can sleep in it. Like I said, really glad we're adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU to that conference next year. Speaking of Cal and Stanford, it is time to get to our final power conference. And it is the conference that's in their swan song. Their last year of existence, at least for now. I don't know what the future holds, but the final year of the Pac-12 in this iteration, and it's something. Truly, I don't think we see more than 2 teams make the tournament, maybe 3. Arizona, they're still cream of the crop here. They are very good. I think, there's a lot of talk always about Arizona kind of being that fraudulent team come March every year, and they just always fall apart in the tournament. They kind of are the Purdue of the West. Maybe this is the year they figure it out. They got Caleb Love, the transfer from North Carolina. It kind of feels like that is a major factor here. I think Arizona is good, but I can't see them shedding that, fraud, name tag. I mean, we'll see. The Final Four's in Glendale this year, so if they can somehow find a way to the Final Four, it's going to be home court advantage for the Wildcats. And then, honestly, at least power conference-wise, this is the story of the year. Kyle Smith and the Washington State Cougars. Now, Kyle Smith, if you've followed his career trajectory, he takes awful jobs, honestly. He really does. He started off at Columbia. I mean, he led Columbia up the ranks. Believe in his final year, they went to the tournament, which was 2016. Then he left to take the San Francisco job. He built that team back up. He left the year before they made the tournament. He left for this Washington State job that he's turned into a very, very good team. I mean, I don't think Washington State has seen success this much since, Tony Bennett left this team. I mean, the last time they made the tournament, I believe, was 2008, and that is when Tony Bennett was the coach there. This team is just, it was a team I don't think anybody was expecting to look good this year. And in the final year of the Pac-12, where next year, I believe they're falling to the WCC because they're doing Mountain West for football. They're going to the West Coast Conference for basketball and all other sports. Same with Oregon State. They needed a year like this in this final year. I know they lost on Saturday to Arizona State, a bad Arizona State team. Bobby Hurley most likely on his way out. But, I mean, they swept Arizona this year. And I think that means something. I know they lost to Oregon. They lost to Cal. They lost to that Arizona State team. But to me, Washington State is the story this year. What football has done to this conference is irreputable. The fact that, Washington State isn't playing Arizona or Oregon or, any of these teams next year, it's truly sad. That's a completely different story for a different day because I have my personal opinions on it. Maybe Thursday because that does tie into the UMass thing. We'll see. But this is about today. Like I said, this conference, I don't really know how many teams we're getting in the tournament here. Arizona and Washington State are locks. Colorado, maybe in. Oregon is a bubble team. Utah, a bubble team. I don't see anybody else really getting in. UCLA's had an awful year. Cal, it's something before you part off for the ACC. Good luck with that. But this conference just, it's not great. It's a shame that it's going, but it's not great. So if I had to pick a team to win the Pac-12 tournament right now, it's going to be Arizona because I think they'll end up probably facing Washington State. It's hard to beat a team 3 times. I don't think Washington State can do it again. But I mean, if Washington State does and they walk away with the final Pac-12 basketball title in a conference that is just filled with basketball history, wow, that would truly be something. So given that, that's going to wrap it up for this, Power 6 College Hoops Roundup on this episode of Bracket Buster Breakdown. Like I said, we'll be back on Thursday. we'll look at the rest of college basketball. There are a lot of teams in there that I think could potentially bust some brackets come March. And, we'll see where we go from there. So if you just stumbled across this video, thank you so much for watching. Click like, click subscribe, tell anybody you know about it. Like I said, make sure you tune back in on Thursday to see what teams might be, going under the radar this year and going to find a way to bust your bracket this year. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you again soon for another episode of Bracket Buster Breakdown.